Now, do you think there is such a thing as British characteristics? We're supposed to be very reserved, aren't we? Love to queue. Yes, love to queue. In a crisis, what's the solution? Cup of tea. Yes. And we love to talk about the weather, and it's not really surprising, is it, considering the great changes we so often see. And we very often complain. I think that's some of our characteristics, and I'm afraid I can't speak about the Iranian characteristics, but certainly the British. Yes, we do rather love to complain about all sorts of things. Now, when I moved to my new flat about 9 months ago, I thought I want to have a little chat with the neighbours, and I chatted to the lady opposite. And she said to me, "Oh, I do love my flat. I've been here 40 years, and I do love it." And she seemed to love where she lived. And, you know, the flats where we live, they're okay, but they're not palaces. But she loved it. She loves it. And I went away, and I thought, that's a little bit unusual. Usually when you meet people, there's often, it's very nice, but, and a few, they'll complain as well. But she hadn't got a complaint. She just thought, this is lovely round here. And I felt blessed, and I thought, I've met an unusual person, and I think I'm going to make friends with her, which I have. So what I want to do, I want to read a story from Jesus' lifetime when we meet, I think, rather an unusual person. Perhaps somebody who behaved in an unexpected way. So if I can have the scriptures, Nick. I think this is a familiar story to you all, from Luke 17. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus travelled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." Okay, just a few little comments on this story. Lepers were compelled by law to keep distance, but these came as near as they could to Jesus. And it seemed that Jesus didn't actually see them at first, but when he did, he responded. But not as he usually did. He didn't touch them. He didn't say, "Be healed." Instead, he told them to show themselves to the priests, which was the normal procedure after lepers had been healed. And in those days, the priests acted as sort of health inspectors. Before you were allowed out in the community, you had to go and see the priest for him to have a good look at you to see whether you were healed. Jesus was putting their faith to the test by asking lepers to behave as though they had been cured. And as they obeyed, they were healed before they ever reached the priest. Now, this is the unusual part. One leper, seeing he was healed, turned back. He didn't wait to go to the priest. And he wanted everyone to know. He had a very loud voice. He returned and, beautiful expression, he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked Jesus for what he had done. Jesus expressed some surprise because only one had returned, and this one a Samaritan. Perhaps the other 9 were so absorbed in their new happiness that they didn't even think to come back. And the Samaritans, the Jews, they wanted little to do with each other. A Samaritan, one in some ways quite ignorant of God's ways, had returned to thank Jesus, a Jewish teacher. When Jesus said, "Your faith has made you well," quite literally, it means your faith has saved you. Maybe Jesus was sending him off with the reassurance that all was well with his soul as well as with his body. All 10 had faith, but only one had gratitude. The Samaritan, like my neighbour, was the unusual one. Quite simply, he was grateful, and he alone returned to the source of his healing to thank him. Now, I want to give a little testimony at this point. And it's a thank you testimony. Because I think you all know about my mum, because all of you are always asking about her, is that maybe 9 months ago, she broke a leg, she was in hospital, then she came out, and she's also got an agonising back problem. And it got to the point when actually she couldn't even walk, and we were thinking, we don't know what to do. And when I phoned her up, she just said, "I'm in absolute agony." Many of you were praying, I know. And although she's 91, the surgeons agreed to operate on her back. And the operation was successful. And she says her pain level has gone from being excruciating to actually nil. Amazing. And she's walking again. She's an old lady. She's not doing somersaults and cartwheels, but she can, with her frame, walk around her garden and do a bit of cooking and that sort of thing. My sister, who lives in Australia, she works in a care home. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, she had a conversation with me, and she said, "You know what, Julia?" She says, "I think it's a bit like almost miraculous. Because I've seen old people when they've broken their limbs. I've seen what happens. They usually deteriorate. But Mum has gone the opposite way. She's done amazing. And, she's walking again. And, she just thought it was amazing." And that's just a little testimony, really, because I want to say thank you to God so much for that thing in my life, for Mum's, that she's better. But I also want to thank you as well. Because I think so many of you prayed, so many of you have come to me again and again and said, I'm praying. And I have really appreciated it. So thank you, and thank you, Jesus. Going back to the story. So, what does this mean for us? I would say the first thing, unusual people. Let's be unusual people, like my neighbour, like the Samaritan. Yes, let's be people of faith, but also let's be people of gratitude. This week, as I've been walking to work, I've been doing a little exercise, and I've been thinking, I'm going to thank God this week for things I have never thanked God for before. And I've been thinking, what can I really thank God for this week? And I've been looking at the trees and the shade the trees give. And I've been looking at the colours, and I thought, the colour white, I've never thanked God for such an amazing colour white before in the flowers. And as I passed the school, I've seen all the children just happily going to school. I was thinking, thank God for peace. Thank God we're not like in Ukraine when there's so much trouble, but our children can go to school in peace. So perhaps that's one thing we can do. Start to think about new things we can thank God for. A little while ago, I was walking on the beach, and there was this metal detector, a man using a metal detector. And being a bit inquisitive, I had to find out what he'd found. So I went to ask him, and he was telling me over the years, he said, well, I found a lot of sweet papers under the sand. But he says, I have found some coins. I've found some really old coins. I've found some really interesting things. And I thought, yes, let's look below the surface. Let's look to see what new things we can really thank God for, because there are so many when we open our eyes. A couple of weeks ago, I was teaching a lesson, and it went horribly wrong. There was a big misunderstanding between some teachers, and I just thought, I have never taught such a chaotic lesson in my life. Everything went pear-shaped. And then I thought, well, I can't thank God. I can't thank God for misunderstandings. I can't thank God for chaos. But you know what? I'm not thanking God for it, but I'm thanking God within it. So I thought, afterwards when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, thank God for patient students. They were really patient and gracious with me. Thank God that people stay cheerful. Thank God that some of the staff helped me. Thank God I stayed at peace. Thank God, actually, in the end, everything worked out really well. And it's not thanking God for the things that really, really go wrong, but it's thanking God within it. There are always things to thank God. God's redeeming grace, I find so often with me in my mistakes. I want to quote one of my favourite Bible commentators. He's a man called Leon Morris. And he makes this comment about the story of the 10 lepers. If people do not give thanks quickly, they usually do not do so at all. I'll say it again. If people do not give thanks quickly, they usually do not do so at all. Daily, let us thank God for his incredible kindness, for his mercy, for his redeeming grace in our lives, and especially for the cross. Giving thanks to others, the bus driver, husbands, wives. What a great testimony that was, Gordon. Thank you for giving that. This week I've been thinking, I'd love to somehow appreciate my boss. How can I do that? And I just had a perfect opportunity. And I sent her a text to say thank you for something. On Friday, I had some of you know a lady called Elizabeth Mayhew. She's a great friend of ours. And she just sent me a little simple text, and it said, "We thank God for you." And I felt so blessed by that text. Why not send a text? I believe that thankfulness is the doorway to many other virtues. It leads to purity. It leads to humility. It leads to faith. It is also the doorway to a much stronger relationship with God and with others. Thankful people are always attractive people. They always see good in others and draw people to themselves. In the Old Testament, there are many ways of sacrificing that the Jews did in the temple. So they took their animals, they took their cakes, whatever, and they took them to the temple to offer a sacrifice to God. And sometimes we have the guilt offerings, we have the sin offerings, we have the burnt offerings, we have the wave offerings. I've talked about these before on a Sunday morning. And these were mostly highly organised, highly regulated. You did them at certain times. And at certain feasts, you would be offering these sacrifices. But there was another offering that was rather different. And this was the thank offering. The thank offering wasn't to be made at a certain time. It wasn't regulated. It was a spontaneous offering. You made it when you were really grateful to God about something, and you used to go to the temple with your animal or your piece of cake or whatever, and you used to go and offer to God a really spontaneous thank offering in gratitude for what God had done. So, this is how I want to finish my talk. I really would like us all to make a thank offering to God this morning, and obviously to continue, because it's a wonderful thing to be grateful. So, what I'd like us to do now for the next 5-10 minutes is to get into little groups of about 6 and together offer up a thank offering to God. What are you going to thank God for? Well, thank him. Say it out aloud if you like, that's great. Please speak Farsi as well as English. So we're going to get into little groups and make a thank offering to God. Please think of things you may never have thanked God for before. Okay, so off you go.